Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another YouTube video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be showing you what I did for my wedding gift thank you cards. Some of you might remember that I am recently married. I just got married at the beginning of January, a couple months ago, and we've had some wedding gifts kind of trickle in. We ended up eloping, and so we didn't have the traditional wedding reception or party or anything like that. So people have been sending gifts, and we're so grateful for them and wanted to send out some thank you notes. So I started out by cutting some watercolor paper. I'm using Arches cold press paper today, and I cut it to 2 3/4 wide by 4 inches tall, or rather 4 inches wide and 2 3/4 tall. And I wanted to keep these fairly simple because I do have quite a few to make, but I also wanted to make them completely handmade. I didn't do that for my wedding announcements. We had many to send, and so I ended up having them printed and sent those out. But for these thank yous, I wanted to have a handmade element to them. Using some Magello Mission Gold watercolors and a size 8 round Zen art brush, and I'm going to be painting very simple leaves with a few different shades of green. And basically, to get the variation in color of green, I don't ever clean off my brush. I just go from one green to another, going from a light green to a dark green to a mid green, just kind of move around on my palette and pick up different colors with my brush. And over time, the colors mix on the brush and they just look a little bit organic. And I love painting leaves like this. It's so relaxing. All you have to do is have a little bit of pressure on your brush. So very light pressure for the sharp point. And then as you paint the mid area of the leaf, you press your brush down and then you lift it up for the pointed end on the other side. Unfortunately, with my camera directly overhead, you can't see it really perfectly how I'm pressing on the brush, but I will, there are a couple angles here that you can see a little bit more. I think you might be able to see a little bit more in this instance, just pressing that down and then lifting up. And I love that by not really ever cleaning off my brush and getting completely wet, the paint dries a little bit on my brush. And then as I paint the leaves, some of them get kind of a rough edge on the dry watercolor paper. I really love that look. So I'm continuing on. In total, I think I painted 17 of these cards in this session, and it went fairly quickly. When you're making a lot of cards like this, the same card essentially, I find doing everything in batches is a whole lot easier than doing, one card from start to finish and then starting over on the second card from start to finish and so on. So for this first step, all I did was paint the leaves. Well, technically, this is the second step. The first step was cutting the paper, and I cut all the papers to the same size and then started painting. And I go through this fairly quickly. I'd say it took me a little bit over an hour to paint all of these. And then I set them aside to dry. I wanted them to dry completely before moving on to the next step, just in case I put my hand, into some wet paint or something like that. I'm just continuing with all those leaves, and I've sped up the video here just so you can kind of see the process. And this is not all of them. I cut out quite a bit of the video footage. In the background, I was actually listening to a podcast. So this is one of those things you can do while you're listening to something or watching a movie. All right, so here's a couple more just in real time, and then I'll be moving on to the next step. And I noticed as I painted on that I started putting more and more leaves on this. The leaves got a little bit smaller and I started putting more and more leaves. So each one of these is different from the next. They're all unique. All right, so there is the finish. It's the very last one. And I let those dry completely. For the greeting, I decided to do some lettering or calligraphy, and I'm using my Finetec Pearlescent Colors palette. I'm going to use one of the gold shades, mixing that up. And at first, I wanted to do all pointed pen. So this is how I applied it to my pointed pen nib. I'm using an oblique pen holder with a pointed pen nib. I think this is a Browse Rose nib. It's one of my favorites. And I started to write thank you on this watercolor paper. Now the watercolor paper, as we know, is Arches, and Arches watercolor paper, and it can be very textured, or it always is actually. And so this pointed pen, while it looks great, it was super, super thin and hard to get good details on this, and it was a little bit troublesome, especially because I did have to reload that pen multiple times for each one. So I think I only did about 5 or 6 of these before I decided that I would alter my plan and do brush lettering on the rest. You see here I had to go back and kind of fill in those gaps where things were skipping because it was just too fine of a line to really show up with this pointed pen. I do love this look, and I wish I could have had the patience to finish it on all of these, but I decided to move to a brush. So I've chosen a very, very tiny brush. This is a 00 brush from American Journey, and I'm just dipping it into that paint and then coming back and adding the brush strokes. Now, to make it a little bit more simple, I didn't try to emphasize the thicks and thins too much. I mostly just wanted to get these letters written on here. Now, if you are not a lettering person, it's not your thing, I think this would be a great opportunity to use a small stamp and do some gold embossing. If I was to do this again, I think I'd look for a nice stamp to use, and then I would just stamp these at the bottom. I think that'd be really, really pretty, and it's a great way to get through a lot of these really fast. So to add a little bit more gold onto these cards, I decided to take the edge of the card over this watercolor paper, and just use my brush that I was using to pick up the paint before and paint the edges. So these edges are going to look pretty rough. They're not super precise, but I'm just adding that gold. Now, if I was to do the stamped version with gold embossing, I would instead press the edges of the watercolor paper into my embossing ink pad and then apply some embossing ink on the edge and heat set that. And then you'd have the perfect color of gold that matches your grading. So after I had all of the edges painted, I have all these watercolor pieces ready to go onto my card bases. I've chosen some craft cardstock here, and I'm just cutting each piece in half. And then I'm using a scoreboard to score them at 4 1/4. These are landscape cards, and I wanted the fold at the top. So I'm just scoring those at 4 1/4 and then setting them aside. And then I'm going to fold them all at the same time. So I'm following that same kind of bulk process for working in batches, and I scored them all at once, and then I'm folding them all at once. I then applied foam adhesive on the back to every single one of the watercolor pieces. Just 3 strips was enough. And I'll set those aside, and I will adhere them all at the same time as well. I just find it a little bit easier in my mind to do one step at a time. I think it goes a little bit smoother that way. And if you have people helping you do this, that's even better. So then I adhered my watercolor panels directly onto the card base, and that is the finished card. So I specifically chose craft colored cardstock because I wanted to be able to write on the inside of these cards without any trouble. But I also think this would look beautiful on a dark navy blue card base. And then if you wanted to use a regular pen, you could just put a little bit of white paper on the inside. Just to make this a little bit easier on myself and my husband as we fill these out, I just wanted to use a color of cardstock that I could use a regular pen on. So those are all of the cards. Hope you guys enjoyed. Gives you some good ideas. There are so many great stamps out there that do branches or flowers like this as well. So you don't necessarily have to do all hand-painted elements. I think you just keep the cards simple, one little image, and you're grading. On screen, I've got 3 more videos for you to check out. These are going to be my most recent videos, including my live streams. So if you're looking for more inspiration, you can check those out. I'll be back on Wednesday with a regular video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys very soon.